You know what's crazy? There has been a Sonic game released every year since his debut in 1991. The only time they took a year off was when that thing happened. Of course, most of these games are 2D or 3D platformers spread across consoles and handhelds, but there have been a few spin-offs of various genres, and of varying quality. So let's take a look at them, and maybe, just maybe, we'll learn nothing. It makes sense that the first spin-off would be a pinball game, as every one of the Genesis games has a casino or pinball style level. This one is different from other pinball games because you actually have a little bit of control over Sonic. I never got past the first stage, but just for this video, I finally beat one level. It's harder than you think. I have to keep jumping back and forth between all these smaller pinball boards and activate switches so you can get the emerald. It would be a lot less frustrating if it didn't reset all the switches every time you died. The beginning has a safe area that doesn't make you die, but the other parts can kill you if you slip by it incorrectly. This adds a lot of tension after you almost make it to the emerald, because if you die, you have to hit all those switches again. I don't know if this is good or bad. I'm not qualified to do any of this. When you get the emerald, you fight the boss, and surprisingly, this is the easiest part of the game, because I didn't even have to touch my controller for this boss. There's only 4 levels, so it's not a long game, but being a pinball game, sometimes it could take a lot longer to just get up the pipe, you blue piece of shit. There actually is a cheat code to give the game a level select, and honestly, this makes the game a lot more enjoyable today. Sonic Spinball is a fun game, but its difficulty and physics keep it from being an all-time great pinball game. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine is the only puzzle game on this list, and that's because the game is actually a reskin of Sega's Puyo Puyo. Although Puyo Puyo is a lot more accepted in America now, back then anything remotely Japanese would turn parents into a frenzy. So instead of anime characters, you fight Eggman's robots. And this Robotnik is actually based on the adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog style. You even fight some of the robots from the show. Funny enough, they didn't bother to change the little Puyo Puyo guy in the middle. So the game is Puyo Puyo, a competitive falling block game where getting 4 of a kind or more colors can clog up your opponent's board. It's a great puzzle game. So good they haven't changed the formula in over 30 years. This is a game I would try out on the Mega Collection, although I would only play the first level. Coming back to it, I realized that the reason I didn't get that far is that the second level has a huge spike in difficulty. You go from absolutely curb stomping this robot to being stomped by this tweaker bot. Look how fast he stacks it. Feels like the game just hustled me. I even set it to easy and the second stage still kicked my ass. There's an exercise mode where you can just stack blocks without an opponent, but the only way to practice the real game is to just keep doing the campaign mode. There's only 13 stages in this game, and I get you have to stretch it out, but maybe you could be a little bit more subtle with the difficulty curve. Of course, you can practice and learn the combos and advanced techniques, but maybe don't absolutely body people when they just figured out how the game works. This game is good if you can get over the difficulty curve. But if you want a more fair experience, might I suggest Puyo Puyo Tetris? That game kicks ass. Here we have the final Genesis spin-off, an interactive activity book / fever dream called Wacky Worlds Creativity Studios. This game lets you go to all these different backdrops and make your own little digital diorama from a select set of sprites. Some of the sprites also have little animations you can use. The only limit is your imagination, and 1 megabyte of memory. You have 4 different cursors that can move sprites, activate their animations, change the color of the sprites, or delete them. The color editor is surprisingly detailed, allowing you to just pick a section and immediately change the color. But those 4 cursors are basically all you can do. You can't enlarge, rotate, or even flip sprites horizontally. Plus, there can only be so many animated sprites because of the game's memory. When you enter a world, there's a pre-made diorama, and you can clear everything with this button.
Who ate all the ketchup?
You also have to keep going up or down to access the menus. This game came with a mouse that makes it a lot easier, but maybe just have one of the buttons bring up the menu? There's also a music editor, but you can't actually put down your own notes or anything. You can only change the settings on predetermined music tracks. This game is obviously a response to Mario Paint, but you can't actually draw anything. Plus, the dioramas and music tracks rely on a limited selection of assets. Well, even with the limited resources given, I recreated the Logan Paul Suicide Forest incident. A kid might like this game. but I imagine they'll get bored of it pretty quickly. Let's move on to the Game Gear, starting with Sonic Labyrinth. And the faster I do this, the faster I can stop looking at the spelling of Labyrinth. The concept is that Sonic can't move fast, okay, already a red flag, and has to use the spin dash to move around. The game is isometric, and each level you have to find 3 keys to unlock the goal. This game came out 2 years before Sonic 3D Blast, but it's funny that they share the same kind of gameplay. It's just that in this one, your main mode of transportation is the spin dash. Walking around is so slow, and when spin dashing, you're kind of at the mercy of the walls. Sound and graphics are pretty good for the Game Gear, but fundamentally, this isn't a fun idea. It's kind of fun when you just bounce off the walls like crazy, but when you actually try to get the keys, it's just boring. Spin dashing everywhere becomes annoying, and the levels aren't interesting enough to make you want to explore. I understand that this is a taking a dump kind of game for the handheld, but there were plenty of other Sonic games for the Game Gear that are much better than this. This truly is one of the worst Sonic games, and that really is saying something nowadays. Here we have Sonic's first racing game, Sonic Drift for the Game Gear. The first one actually didn't come out in the States, but was released as a bonus in Sonic Mega Collection Plus and Sonic Adventure DX on the GameCube. I played it through DX on the GameCube, and yep, just as bad as I remember. It's one of those old racing games that uses pseudo 3D, kind of like Outrun, but this sure as hell ain't no Outrun. You'll notice that half the screen is used for the map, which I thought would show the other player if you use the link cable, but no, the map is always showing. If this looks visually cramped right now, imagine playing this on a Game Gear screen. The only controls are accelerate, brake, and if you have 2 rings, you can press up to do a special move. If you hold 1 and 2, you can drift, but for some reason, I kept slipping when I tried drifting. Turns out you can drift too much and make yourself slip. So you don't want to drift too much in Sonic Drift. The first game is pretty bad, but luckily the second one fixes a lot of the problems. It's much more clear how much you can drift, there's more items, and the stages have a lot more variety. It's still just an okay racing game though, and it doesn't really have any Sonic DNA. This could be a racing game for any franchise. My biggest complaint for both games is that the tracks are too damn narrow. When you try to pass another racer, it's a lot more of a hassle than it should be. And if you hit them in the back, it slows you down a lot. Maybe these games would be better if they gave you more screen space and widened the tracks a bit, but you're better off just playing catch with your son. Alright, finally done with those stupid Game Gear games. Time to move on to the fun stuff. Specifically, 2 games available on the Sonic Gems collection. First up is Sonic the Fighters. The game was made using the same engine as Sega's Virtua Fighter, and this is the first truly 3D Sonic game. Get out of here, you bastard. I think it looks great. That very polygonal look of those Sega AM2 games have a certain charm that they're obviously outdated, but they still look appealing. I think it works better for the Sonic characters since they're super cartoony, and that's reflected in the game's animation. The moves are super over the top, and there's these great squash and stretch effects that really give the moves impact. The animation is like 3D Looney Tunes, which is honestly impressive for an arcade game in 1996. The game has a punch, kick, and barrier button, plus a whole lot of other moves you can do. Blocking is a resource, so there's only so many times you can block, and you can spend a block to go into hyper mode, where you're super fast for like 3 seconds. There are 8 fighters to choose from, including 3 secret characters. The boss of arcade mode is Metal Sonic, and once you think you're done, the game throws you a fight with Eggman, where you're super powered and only have 15 seconds. It's very cathartic to just curb stomp him after fighting Metal Sonic 12 times. See, it's that little extra effort that really makes an old game stand out. While there are a lot of moves, the game is no Tekken 3, but that's okay. It doesn't need to be the most in-depth or balanced fighting game. As long as button mashing is still fun, I think anyone can enjoy it. The Fighters has a niche tournament scene that goes absolutely crazy. You think these guys would put in all this work ironically? This game wasn't received well by critics at the time, and internet critics slammed this game back in the late 2000s. But playing it today, I really enjoyed it. It's a simple, yet fun fighting game with a lot of personality. Amazingly, this game got released on Xbox Live Arcade, and is backwards compatible with the Series X. You can get it for $5 digitally right now. And yet, F-Zero GX is still stuck on GameCube. Here's one that is infamous on the internet. Sonic R. It's a 3D Sonic racing game for the Saturn and PC. And for the longest time, this game was the butt of the joke for every popular internet game reviewer guy. Person.
Sonic R just plain sucks. There's no redeeming quality about it.
You boot up the game and you're treated to an amazing soundtrack. Internet critics actually gaslit us into thinking this soundtrack is bad, when it's actually one of the best soundtracks ever. This was the late 2000s to early 2010s, when everyone just hated Sonic.
Sonic was never good.
Everyone parroted the same opinions like, all the games suck because he has too many friends. It has a story. Lame. Oh, it's in 3D? That never works. Except these times. These are all superfluous reasons. The bad games were bad because the gameplay was bad. Not because of Rouge's sweet tits. What was I saying? Oh yeah, it's a racing game with 5 cups. I'm sorry, that's 5 stages. There's only 5 tracks to play. Well, maybe the gameplay can make up for it.
Ready, set, go!
Oh my god, this is actually pretty fun. It doesn't control amazing, but it does give you that sense of reckless speed that fits for a Sonic game. Since it's a racing game, you actually hold down the B button to accelerate, which is a little weird in a Sonic game, but you get used to it. This game is like a racing platformer, and you can jump around entire sections of the track for shortcuts, unless the game just doesn't want you to. I didn't find all the unlockables on these stages, but there are moments in the game where it will completely disorient you. Some of these tracks remind me of Yoshi's Valley. If you get first place on all 4 tracks, you unlock the 5th one, and after beating the 5th one, that's it. It's over. This took 25 minutes. Sure, you can get the unlockables on the 5 tracks, and the extra characters are cool, but that's all there is. Granted, these tracks are bigger and have more branching paths than the average Mario Kart stage, but still, you can unlock everything in like 2 hours. I think the actual problems with this game doesn't come from the controls or the music, but rather the lack of content. The graphics are also criticized. I mean, you can see some of the limbs don't even connect. But goddamn, low poly Sonic is just the cutest thing. I'm kind of bummed we never got a full Saturn platformer in this style, but at least we got Sonic Adventure. Sonic R is a fun game, but it is short on content. If they just had more tracks, then this could be a great Sonic racing game. You have been redeemed, my son. Next up is Sonic Shuffle, the only Sonic spin-off that was on the Dreamcast. A party game that I get to play by myself? Let's fucking go! Sega actually got help from Hudson Soft for the development, the same people behind the early Mario Party games. So it should be good, right? Right? Surprisingly, this party game has a story mode. It even has cutscenes and voice acting. Although if you thought the adventure voice acting was robotic, this is borderline AI.
Well, I've got nothing better to do.
Well, I should be fine to just jump right in. After all, it's just Mario Party, right? Maybe I should look at a tutorial. So the tutorial explains the certain spaces and how you need to collect the most emblems at the end of the game. The emblems can be attained by getting precious stones, which are the game's version of stars, getting the most rings, getting first place in the stage clear minigame. What exactly is that? Or completing the hidden quest. Well, I guess you don't have to explain that one. It's hidden. Instead of dice, you use a set of cards to move around, and these are all random numbers. You can choose between the ones you have, or you can pick a random one from an opponent. The strategy comes from balancing the cards you have with the ones everyone can steal from everyone else. S cards let you either steal a card, swap your entire hand with another player, or move 1 to 7. Of course, 7 is S, in case it wasn't confusing enough. By the way, stealing a card from a player is still random, so it's only slightly better than just using one of their random cards. The game uses rings like the coins in Mario Party, and rings are used for one final emblem at the end or using the shops. There are special gems you can get that are basically like items from Mario Party. Minigames are actually played when someone lands on a minigame space. They don't happen at the end of a turn. To get the precious stones, you have to land on the space, and then battle an enemy for it. You win by having a card that's equal or greater than the enemy's number. It sounds easy, but if you're low on cards, you have to take a chance with what the other players have. Also, you don't just pick a card. You pick the card and have to stop the number on a roulette. You know, just in case it wasn't too easy. The story is that the world is ending, and we have to help this little Knights reject get the stones back, or else shit's going down, son.
Who are you?
I think this is the only time Sonic showed interest in a girl. And it's this thing. So even though the world is ending, the four of us must fight each other to get these rocks we could easily walk to. I get this is a party game story, but could you at least make the CPUs like evil clones of the characters to have it make a little bit of sense? All I was thinking while playing was, why are we doing this? So instead of turns, the game ends when someone gets 4 precious stones. Okay, this is already a problem, because imagine if in Mario Party the game doesn't end until someone gets 4 stars. Most people get like 2 stars max in a regular Mario Party game. So wouldn't this system make the games go on way too long? It sure does. Especially when the default for the story mode is 4 precious stones, and you have to do this card bullshit to get them. You go around the spaces, and the game can either go very quickly or be a huge slog. The fact that minigames are tied to spaces instead of turns means you can have many turns go by without a single minigame, or have a full-on minigame every time someone moves. When it's late in the game and you just want to get a precious stone, the minigames aren't something you look forward to. Alright, precious stone is right there. God damn it, another minigame. Please, the stone is right there. Just let me end this. We just did one. Minigames only get you rings and the occasional item stone. And let me tell you, some of these minigames are not explained well. A lot of the minigames just have you collect rings, so you just watch a bunch of bullshit happen, and then maybe you win. I don't know. They never show you how many rings you have during these games. I mean, I wouldn't say the minigames are bad, they just aren't explained properly. Like this 1v3 with the DJ, I have no idea how the DJ controls work. Or this one where you're supposed to jump on the panels in the right order. Turns out you just press the jump button and you win. Oh, and there's actually a time limit when you're in the rules menu. So if you want to get a drink, tough shit, loser. That's what you get for playing Sonic Shuffle. You know, the minigames wouldn't be so bad if you could win something besides rings, because despite how much rings are in the game, they don't really matter. You get an emblem at the end if you have the most, and you can use them at the shops to buy items. But other than that, they're worthless. So when you go through a string of minigames, it just pisses you off because the rings don't fucking matter. And one person can win so many rings in one game that you might as well not even try. 72? What the fuck, Knuckles? There's also these events that can happen, which I don't care. Plus, you can fight monsters on these spaces for items, but it just adds to the time. The single player mode is such a chore. And obviously these games are better in multiplayer, but this is way too complicated for a Sonic party game. My first, and only, game in the story mode took 90 minutes. And that's with very stupid AI that would just walk away from the precious stone for no reason. I also got very lucky twice. And if I wasn't lucky, this could have taken like 2.5 hours. You can watch Fellowship of the Rings in the time it would take to do a single game of Sonic Shuffle. In multiplayer mode, you can choose how many precious stones end the game, which helps, but it's just a bad system. It would have been better to have turns, but if you're not going to do turns, how about having only a set amount of precious stones appear? That way you don't risk a game where theoretically people can get 12 stones between them before the game can actually end. In the extras menu, you can use rings to unlock concept art, and this fish tank tells you how many minigames you've played. If you want to actually replay minigames, you know, a common feature of any party game, you have to go to the photo album, go to another, and unlock the first picture. Why is it so cryptic just to do something as simple as replaying the minigames? Why is it hidden? Why did I buy the fucking Gamma picture? Because he's awesome, that's why. Sonic Shuffle is a bad party game. I get that Sega and Hudson want to do something different from Mario Party, even though they already blatantly copied the entire premise, but they made it overly complicated, don't explain the minigames properly, don't explain the concepts of the game properly, and made the game way too slow. This might actually be the worst Sonic game of all time. I mean, I don't think 06 wasted your time like this one did. People joke that Mario Party ruins friendships, but with this game, your friends would actually not come over to your house anymore.
Precious? Stone?
While the Game Boy Advance was known for the Sonic Advance series, there are two spin-offs that also came to the handheld. One is Sonic Pinball Party, a decent pinball game with boards based on Sonic, Knights, and Samba de Amigo. It's a good pinball game, although I will say the boards can be a little too cluttered visually. But the real star of the Game Boy Advance was Sonic Battle. Sonic Battle is the second fighting game in the Sonic series, and it's pretty unique in terms of fighting games. It's isometric, and you have a simple combo with 2 heavy attacks, plus special attacks that you can actually pick after you're knocked out. This is actually a great way to get over the GBA's limited controls, as the R button can do an air and ground special, but you get to choose which attacks are which. There's a projectile, a power attack, and a trap, and you choose one for the ground, one for the air, and the third one you'll automatically block. It sounds technical, but the game is pretty simple to pick up and play. The story is that the Sonic gang finds an ancient robot that they name Emerald, who is actually an ancient weapon, and the only way to save him is to give him all 7 Chaos Emeralds. The story mode is basic, but for someone who likes all these characters, it's fun to see them interact and see the world they live in. Apparently they all live in Emerald Town, and Tails' house is shaped like his head, that fucking 300 IQ sociopath. I'm not supposed to talk to strangers. Tails, you've met Rouge before. Also, you're like 35 in human years. I would say this game really activated my... what's a politically correct term for this? Hyper-obsession with Sonic. You've got all the major characters with their own unique anime fight moves, and these fantastic sprites were used in many Newgrounds cartoons. Being a Sonic fan of the 2000s did psychological damage that would even make the CIA blush. While the music and the sprite work is great, the gameplay can be a little repetitive. It's easy to cheese in this game. You can just constantly launch people with your heavy attack and then follow up with a dunk. I'm sure anyone who played this game back then knows what I'm talking about. But you need to cheese in the story mode because it gets really hard. The game insists on 10 stock fights as the norm, and 10 stocks is just way too much. There's many points in the story where you'll beat an opponent, and then the game will be like, nope, have to do it again with 10 stocks this time. The developers definitely wanted players to get the most out of the story, but decreasing the stocks and repeat fights would have helped out the pacing a lot. Speaking of tedious, Emerald is both the best and worst part of Sonic Battle. You earn moves from other characters, and you can use them to customize Emerald's moveset. This is such a cool idea because you can try out all these different combinations of other characters' moves. They even gave Emerald all these different animations to adapt all the moves for him. Imagine if Smash Bros. Had something like this. There could be an entire tournament scene just for the custom characters. However, Emerald can only have so many moves based on his skill points, which is fair, but the problem is you only get 1 or 2 skill points for every match, and moves cost like 15 skill points on average. Each of these stars is worth 5 skill points, and you only start out with 30. This makes Emerald a huge grind, and his default moves are so bad that whenever you have to use Emerald, you have no choice but to cheese it with the only good moves you have. I was lucky to get a good dunk attack early, so I just did heavy and dunk over and over again when I had to fight as Emerald. As much as I like this game, it's so easy to cheese. Not only with the dunk attacks, but characters like Rouge and Tails can just hover and spam air attacks. This is actually a viable strategy to get through Rouge's story, since she has one of the hardest missions early on in the game. Sonic Battle has legitimately great sprite work and music, and its gameplay is fun despite its simplicity. My biggest gripe is that its campaign has some pacing and difficulty issues, and its best feature takes too long to really become fun. I'd still recommend it for Sonic fans though. I've been dogging on Emerald a bit, but man, I was so happy to see him in that Shadow short. Here we have Sonic's other attempt at a racing game, Sonic Riders for the 6th gen. I remember as a kid, this game was kind of complicated for a racing game, but maybe I was just being a dumb kid. After all, this seems like a combination of a snowboard game and Wipeout, so it should be easy to pick up and play as a 72-year-old. Wait, hold on. What's this wind tunnel? Wait, why am I on foot? How do I jump? Okay, maybe I need to see a tutorial. And there's no tutorial for this pretty complex racing game. Well, let me look online. Oh, 20 minutes. That should be good enough. Okay, now I understand. Thank you, PSP man. Okay, so this is a racing game, but there's a lot of stuff you need to keep track of. So, you automatically go forward, similar to a snowboard game, and that meter on the right is your air, which is kind of like your gas. You replenish it by doing tricks, finding certain shortcuts, finding these pit stops, or doing these automatic sections where you have to spin the joystick. You can boost with B, but that drains your air, as well as drifting with the shoulder buttons. When your opponents boost or drift, they leave behind this wind trail. That's turbulence you can ride for a speed boost, and you can do tricks off of it. While you're boosting, you can also bump into your opponents to deplete their rings. Rings allow you to level up, which gives you more max speed and a larger air tank. Oh, and if you run out of air, you have to run on foot until you do something to get your air back. Did you get all that? Good, because there's more. There are 3 types of characters: speed, flying, and power. And they all have their own unique shortcuts on each level. Speed characters can grind rails. Flying characters can go off ramps to these flying gates. By the way, don't jump for the flying ramps. Just ride them. Unless it's this one ramp in particular. This one you have to jump. And the power characters just punch through shit. Finally, when you get to a ramp, hold jump and let go at the edge to get maximum air. If you hold forward, you do a long jump. If you hold back, you do a high jump. Each one can get you to different shortcuts. Okay, now that we've gone over everything, this game is fun. It has a huge learning curve, and the fact that the only tutorial is in the instruction manual is very strange. This is a Sonic game. You'd think they'd help ease a younger audience into it, but this game is like, if you can't learn it, get the fuck out. Riders has free race, mission mode, and story mode. The story is that Eggman is holding a racing Grand Prix, and all you need is a Chaos Emerald to join. So, like an idiot, Sonic and his friends do exactly what he says. You're just gonna leave the Chaos Emeralds right there? Right in the open? Meanwhile, a group of birds called Jet, Wave, and Storm are actually working with Eggman to use the Chaos Emeralds to find their ancestors' lost treasure. From there, it's just a bunch of races until they find the ancient temple, fight a boss, and find the ancient treasure. It sounds like I'm glossing over it, but that's because each story mode is only 5 races. Don't worry though, because this game is so fucking hard, you definitely won't beat it too fast. On top of a pretty steep learning curve for a Sonic game, you have to be almost perfect for these races if you want to win. You have to hit every shortcut, don't die, and don't use too much of your air at the end. It's hard, and the game's physics will just throw you off a cliff if you don't master drifting. But man, once you get that perfect run, you realize you just went through a high-speed thrill ride and mastered this stupid hoverboard game. It's nowhere near as good as F-Zero, but that sense of speed and accomplishment from mastering a difficult race, it's definitely there. But seriously, how the fuck is there not a tutorial for this game? It's so hard. I imagine the steep learning curve is why this game gets panned so much, because as far as the graphics, sound, and track design go, it's really well done. Plus, I like the birds. Although Jet has literally the same voice as Usopp from the 4Kids One Piece dub, and I can only hear Usopp.
I lost, so don't play games with me. I don't want your pity, nor do I need it. It really hit!
I know you're expecting me to rip this game apart, but honestly, it really is a fun game once you get over the learning curve. Maybe the story missions could have been a little more forgiving. Luckily, the races aren't too long, so if you fuck up too much, you can start over quickly. If you enjoy high-speed racers, snowboarding games, or Sonic porn, I say give this game a shot. Just look at a tutorial first. Next is the sequel? Follow-up? Sonic Riders Zero G. So this game has kind of the same gameplay as the previous one, and hey, they actually have a tutorial this time. The biggest difference in this game is that instead of drifting or boosting, you have this gravity mechanic. So if you want to do a sharp turn or go fast, you activate which is cool the first time, but gets annoying pretty quickly. The main point is that there's no drifting in this game, which was essential for doing turns in the previous one, and not just the super sharp ones. So anytime you press drift, you do this stupid 0G animation. Not that you need it that much because the track design is very linear. I imagine this was done to make it easier, and because this game used tilt controls to steer on the Wii, but this makes the tracks way more boring than the first one. Since this gravity dive replaces the boost, this is the only time where you can actually speed up. Turbulence is gone, and gravity dive takes so long and uses so many resources that it's only worth it to use it at certain straightaways. Don't worry though, because the game will just tell you the best time to use it. Then there's just all these dumb decisions, like the gear system gives you upgrades when you collect rings, but it locks basic abilities from the last game behind rings. You know, I thought the learning curve and difficulty was a detriment to the last game, but I realize now that the last game's biggest fault was a lack of a proper tutorial, because without that learning curve and difficulty, you get 0G, and it's boring. The sense of speed is gone, the sense of accomplishment is gone, and you're just left with a very below average racing game. Sonic Riders could have turned down the difficulty a bit, but 0G dumbed down the mechanics way too much. So there's nothing to master. Oh yeah, the story is, who gives a fuck? You already met the birds. I beat both story modes in like 90 minutes and pretty much won every race on my first try. I think we can blame the Wii, because all of this was probably done to compensate for using the motion controls to steer. But when you play it on PS2 like I did, it's just way too easy. 0G is a great example of why you don't dumb down your mechanics. Just help people learn it. There was another sequel called Sonic Free Riders, which was exclusive for Kinect, and this is actually probably the worst Sonic game of all time. Maybe. I don't know. I don't have a Kinect, but I imagine the dumbed down tracks of 0G, combined with the inaccuracy of the Kinect, would make this a terrible experience. Who knows? Maybe we'll come back to it in the future. Alright, there's one more game that I really want to get to, and I think you know which one it is. But before that, I'd like to lightning round the last couple of spin-offs that came after it. Sega really slowed down with the Sonic spin-offs in the 2010s, but there were a few that had Sonic crossover with other Sega franchises. First we have Sega Superstars Tennis, which is honestly a pretty decent tennis game. I've only played Mario Tennis, and this game is almost as fun as that. It's got a bunch of different Sega characters and Sega-related minigames, and the actual tennis gameplay feels good. Not much to say when a sports game is actually good. Then we got kind of a trilogy of racing games, starting with Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing. I guess after the tennis game, they needed that Sonic branding. Sonic All-Stars is a very solid racing game. Good controls, good sense of speed, and I love the Sega fan service. But they really knocked it out of the park with its sequel, Racing Transformed. You get more fan service, faster gameplay, and the tracks change mid-race between cars, boats, and planes. This might also have the weirdest roster ever, with guest stars Wreck-It Ralph, Team Fortress, Danica Patrick, and Yogg's Cast. Apparently that was a YouTube channel that made a huge charity donation that won them a cameo in the game. Hold on, let me check something. There it is. Then, nearly 7 years later, Sega releases Team Sonic Racing. Thanks for fucking up the alphabetical order, Sega. Now, like many, I was disappointed that we weren't getting the Sega fan service or the different vehicles like Transformed. But after actually playing it, Team Sonic Racing is also a very good racing game. This one has team mechanics where you can give items to teammates and give them a boost when they're behind you. The team racing does kind of lose its fun if you can't find someone to race with, but if you don't want to do team racing, solo racing is also very fun. I am disappointed that all the other Sega characters aren't here, but I do love these assholes. Except for Zavik. Your mouth doesn't make any sense. The last one was The Murder of Sonic the Hedgehog, a visual novel that Sega released for free as an April Fool's joke. It's a murder mystery gone wrong. So you join Tails and Amy to find out who murdered Sonic. It's a fun little visual novel with a little interactivity. It's incredibly easy though, as any critical thinking or puzzle solving is done through this little mini game, which is fine. I like that this game gives the side characters a chance to shine. Plus, all their outfits are adorable. It's a free game with good art that will take you about 2 hours to beat. My only gripe is that there's no voice acting, but the game's free, so I'll give it a pass. But the final game for this video is another dialogue-heavy game, and it's the 5th most infamous Sonic game of all time. Sonic's first and only attempt at an RPG, Sonic Chronicles Dark Side Brotherhood. You'd think there'd be more Sonic RPGs, but I guess this entry scared Sega enough to never attempt another Sonic RPG ever again. Which is a shame. Sonic is basically a shonen anime, so a turn-based RPG with all his friends really isn't a bad idea. This game was developed by BioWare of all people, right before they were bought by EA. So they're fully to blame for this. Okay, actually this was during EA's buyout, which is why the game had to be rushed. So it's both their faults. The game starts and, oh boy, look at this cutscene. The fucking Leapfrog game had better cutscenes. This is like a webisode on 4kids.com. Our heroes defeated Eggman, and now it's 1 month or 5 years later, I don't know. And now we get control of Sonic. Oh no. Oh no, 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 no. All movement is controlled with the touch screen. You move by dragging the stylus and interact with things by tapping these icons. What's funny is that you can interact with these buttons by pressing L or R, but they couldn't bother to let you move with the D-pad? Tails tells Sonic that Knuckles has been kidnapped and our heroes have to save him, right after Sonic helps his old man chop some wood. You gotta love how consistently inconsistent the humans are in Sonic games. We get into the game's battle system, and it's a pretty standard turn-based RPG. Every turn you choose whether to attack, defend, use items, or use special attacks. Each turn you actually attack multiple times, as shown by the icons on the top screen. Early in the game, you'll notice you miss your attacks. A lot. That's because your attack stat is actually your attack accuracy, and doesn't actually increase your attack power. That's predetermined for each character. So the question is, why the would I put my points into anything but attack? The sound effects are not good. In fact, I think most of them are from stock sound effect libraries. Like, that's a Hanna-Barbera sound effect. And that's the children's cheer sound effect when you headshot a grunt. Ugh, what was that sound? Oh my god, is that the sound when you exit the menu? You know, I haven't played a lot of RPGs, but I'm pretty sure menu sound effects are pretty damn important for a game that's 95% menus. In fact, none of the sound effects are good. Stuff like opening a chest or leveling up does not have good feedback, which is necessary for an RPG. How far are we into this game? 20 minutes? Great. There are these special attacks that require PP points, haha, and they trigger a little touchscreen minigame. And it froze. Let's try that again. And it froze again. Apparently this is a common problem with emulating this game. This one tutorial at the beginning causes the game to freeze, and you can't progress any further. I tried some other methods to get by it. I did the scripted event before learning this tutorial. It froze. I tried using the European ROM. It froze. Well, I guess emulation isn't gonna work, and I don't have a modded 3DS to capture footage. So I guess we're going back to 2008 YouTube. Guy, drop the stylus. Fuck. Fuck. Can't see shit. Alright, getting to that tutorial. Please freeze. Please freeze. Fuck. Yo, I gotta say, playing this game on its intended hardware, it still sounds like shit. The music in this game is bad. Like, it doesn't sound finished. Listen to this Rugrats ass bullshit. Well, turns out, because of the EA buyout, BioWare lost the licensing for the music at the very end of this game's development. They had a week to put new music in, so they made a bunch of MIDI files of other Sonic songs. I wonder if that's what happened with the sound effects, which is why they're all either stock sounds or just terrible.
Oh my god.
A turn-based RPG with bad sound effects and music? Well, at least the writing and the gameplay sucks.
Fuck.
Man, once you get to the second world, you really notice how annoying these touchscreen controls are. It's especially great when you're recording with an iPhone. The game also tells you about these safe areas like Tails' workshop, which heal all your party members like a save point. However, there's no indicator that you all get healed. So you just go in, get out, and then you're healed. No sound effect or anything. Yeah, that's not confusing the first time it happens. I do wonder how much of this was because of being rushed by EA, or BioWare not having experience making games for handhelds. When enemies try to escape or your team tries to flee, you have to do this minigame where you jump over boxes. And it gets old very quickly. It makes grinding even more tedious when enemies keep escaping and you have to do this dumbass minigame. It's not that this minigame is hard, it's just that this isn't worth it for some wasps. You know how I can tell this is a bad RPG? Because in battle, you can't even see what items do. You see the names, but they don't tell you their effects. So you have to remember, does the prune juice or the rock salt cure poison? There also isn't really a clear indicator on when the enemies will attack. It could be between any of your character's attacks. This becomes a problem because the enemies also have these quick time events that you can dodge. But since you don't know when the enemies are going to attack, you could be, I don't know, yawning, and miss half of the quick time event, taking a ton of damage. The story is whatever. It doesn't have any of the little voice clips like Sonic Battle did, so it really loses that sense of personality. Because this is a BioWare game, there are multiple dialogue options you can choose from that range from sweet little angel to total dickhead. These dialogue options don't affect the overall story, but you can lose possible party members or side quests if you choose the wrong option. So basically, you just have to be nice 100% of the time so you don't miss anything. In my opinion, this doesn't really work with a pre-established character, because I don't get a sassy Sonic. Look, I played this game for 2 hours. I think that's enough to get a feel for it, and honestly, it's just boring. I see moments of a good game in here, but I get whiplash by the bad design decisions. The bad music and sound effects, the dialogue options that don't add anything, the lack of communication in the battle menus, and the annoying touchscreen controls that just really hurt this game. I feel that a sequel to this game could fix the problems, but we can never get a sequel, or even a re-release of this game, because of Ken f***ing Penders. If you don't know, Ken Penders was a writer and artist for the Archie Sonic comics, and he made a whole bunch of original characters for that comic. Penders learned that Sega and Archie didn't have the contract claiming that he sold the rights to the characters. So when Penders tried to claim his characters back, Sega and Archie tried to sue Penders. But because they didn't have the contract due to incompetence, they seriously lost the contract. Penders was in the right, legally speaking. So they eventually settled and Penders got all of his original characters back, and then Sega rebooted the comic with IDW, wiping away any trace of Penders. So Penders then sued Sega and EA because Chronicles' story is about a tribe of time-traveling echidnas, which he claimed was similar to his characters of time-traveling echidnas. I honestly think Chronicles was referencing the echidnas from Adventure, but because of this lawsuit, Chronicles is a copyright time bomb for Sega. So they decided to never revisit it or bring back any of the characters introduced in it. Sorry, Shade fans. She's stuck in the Penderverse. Forever. The fact that even the most hardcore Sonic fans don't really care if this game comes back should be a sign of its quality. The battle system is okay, but the writing, graphics, and sound aren't good enough to make you want to keep going. It's a shame that this game killed the idea of a Sonic RPG, because I think if they made a new one with proper development that really embraced all of Sonic's universe, I think it could be up there with the Mario RPGs. Look, I could play this game more, but am I really going to hate it less? Last time I forced myself to play a long Sonic game, I got COVID, and I didn't even make a video out of it. I'm not doing that again. Well, those were the Sonic spin-offs. And you know, for how much shit all these games got back then, there were only like 3 games on this list that were truly bad. I'm glad that Sonic has been able to keep himself relevant all these years. Hell, feels like the movies have made him as popular as he was in the 90s. I would love for Sega and Sonic Team to try again with another spin-off. You know, one that's not a meme game. We got Sonic Rumble coming out, but that's still a platformer. Maybe bring back Riders, or try another fighting game, or hell, give a Sonic RPG another shot. I'm glad that Sega is embracing all the aspects of Sonic and not just the Genesis games. And I hope that leads to a spin-off that celebrates the entire history of the series. Maybe a shooting game. Oh wait, they already did that. Next time.